Hello, welcome back to my channel, Checks Capture Threats. Today's episode 64 of the Chess Guide, will be going over long-term planning. So, today's episode we will be going over 3 openings here. What we're going to be doing is talking through how we can kind of put all these pieces into a good endgame and what we're going to be doing as our plan. So, hopefully you're going to enjoy some of this and hopefully you can understand that sometimes, some of the openings we go over, you might be able to use in your games as well. So, we've got the Queen's Gambit here. We also have the new King's Indian Defence that we just did recently. And last but not least, we also have the London system. So, let's start off with the Queen's Gambit. Now, firstly, what do we mean by long-term planning? We mean that we, what are we imagining towards like the latter middle game to the end game. So, for example, in this one, our long-term plan is we know soon that we're going to be able to try and attack this pawn. We know that if we have a look at our pawn structure, our pawns are going like this. So if we remember, it's like going in that diagonal. That means we want to attack the queen side half the time as well. So that means in the latter stages we'll be trying to push a4 and b4 after these pawns have gone. We'll also be probably getting our rooks towards the centre a lot here, because especially this big push here to e4. Now we also have other moves here we can think of as long term. We want to obtain some of these squares in the middle. Anywhere like that on black side would be great. So we have that, but also we've got to think, do we want to move pieces around? Do we want to if we want to try and attack this pawn, for example, maybe we want to get our knight, to try and attack here. Maybe we just want to play a queen move to b3 or something and force other stuff, play a bishop back, and long term, we can just keep pieces back and wait for the middle game to resolve itself, and then we might have an understandable position. That's what I'm trying to get across. So, hopefully you now understand what we're trying to go through as best we can. Obviously we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but as long as we have an idea, then it's good enough. So, that was just a short one over this one. Now we'll go a little bit deeper in some of these. So, here we have the King's Indian Defence. So, remembering how our pawn is like this, and, now they've pushed the pawn here. This was that Sejmic attack thingy. So, because they did f3. Now, obviously this position is quite closed for black, so how can we resolve some of this stuff? Now, some moves obviously we can do long term is we're going to try and attack pieces like this bishop, and attack this sort of side. So, a knight move like this is very nice. But also, there's other things now. If we look at the pawn structure again, we are actually definitely attacking the queen side again here. And there's a few ways we can do this, especially a move like queen to b6 here, because we're attacking this pawn, and this will result them into doing something like these rook or queen moves. Now, we also, if we think about every other piece here, this bishop long term is probably going to be staying there, or it might have to recapture here or not. This knight is probably going to end up towards the center, I'd like to say. This knight either will be captured, or we have a few things. We could move it positionally like this. It goes quite far then. Very weird amount of moves we could do there. Or in the later stages, if these pawns maybe go, we could even get something like this on the knight moves. You maybe have to go here as well. So, long term as well, these pawns, obviously, they're going to be pushing up quite quickly. This bishop is the only piece that long term you'll probably struggle thinking of doing, because you just don't know what happens with the pawn structures, because you don't really want to push this pawn and say do that, because you want your knight or queen there. And after you move your knight there, let's say, your bishop hasn't got too much of any ideas to move. So what we have to think of here is, maybe just think of the pawns then. So what is this pawn here, e7, going to do? So I would say probably has, in the later stages, we're going to see this push obviously happen, but, do it in the later stages because we don't want the pin, for example. So we have that. And last but not least, let's just think quickly what white will do long term. So here, white is, I'll actually even flip the board here. What will white be doing long term? So here, probably Obviously the knight's got to come out probably on f4. If we have a look at the pawn structure, again, they're going to be attacking our queen side, but just because of how good that is. So again, you're going to see that little wall between the A and B pawns. Obviously, we'll still probably be casting kingside. This queen will probably actually end up somewhere like this, for example, or even like this. One of these sort of squares, definitely. Now, if we have a look at this bishop, that's going to be the difficult one because it's just so difficult. We have to push one of these pawns just to make it a little bit open. So it's not going to be in the best position. And obviously, we know the knight's going to do something like this. And I would say we keep the pawn structure as best as we can for white. So that is the King's India defense one. Now we're going to go over the London system. So I'm going to give you a few seconds. You can pause the video, obviously, and try and come up with as many long-term ideas as you possibly can for white. Okay, hopefully you've found them. Now, the main thing here is obviously being black's go. You can't just immediately take this pawn, by the way. You know, it looks great, but that's something we're going to come to. So, because it's obviously black's go here, as this has been highlighted that this was the last move. So, long term, what will white be able to do? White here has many things. So, if you remember the London system, the main thing here is e4 is a vital push. So, if you said that, perfect, that is one of them. Even c4, I'll give you that. And again, now it's a little bit difficult with the pawn side, like how they're going to be, which side we're attacking. Now, in this position, I would say still attack the queen side, purely because there is no attack you can do on the king side with your pawns, because you're double pawned. The only thing is, you're double pawned for a very good reason, and that is your very good attack onto these free, like this free attack on this pawn. So you kind of have to limit them to play moves like this, and they're going to struggle. So obviously we are better here as white. Now, castling is a difficult one. If you say castle queenside in your long-term plan here, I'm all for that. That's actually a very good idea, because if you want to protect these pawns, because you can, and you don't need to push them, then that's fine. You know, we can have that sort of protection here, because obviously we can't castle this side, because we've just opened up this whole line. So that's a very good idea. Now, also, we have moves like knight to e5. That's a very solid move. We also have stuff like f3. That's also very good after that. And then last one is stuff like rook to h4 is also very good. So that is white. So I'm going to give you a few seconds to have a look at black's sort of thing. So again, what's long term for black here? Okay. So there's not as much here for black right now. But obviously, the main thing is you've got to think about what white's trying to do long term. So if they're going to try and push this, obviously we want to try and protect it as much as we can, or attack it, should we say. So what we could do is try and push our pawns. We could even push this c5 pawn, for example, and look at something like this, for example. Obviously we can't at the minute because of this pawn is going. So obviously our first stage of action would be to play something like this. Just a simple g6 blocks all of this, and then we can really result to our game. So here, obviously, we're going to want to probably push the queenside pawns now because we've already castled, and we're going to try and... But we have very good ideas of doing that because we've got nothing to stop that. Our rooks, this rook's probably going to stay on these tiles to protect the pawn. This rook's probably going to try and help this e6 pawn to help the e5 push. This bishop is probably actually going to come back, though. So to attack this bishop, and this queen would force a trade, at least, if you play something like that, and you might have a nice open file for your rook. We also have moves like queen to come out to b or c7 here, and maybe even a5. So that is it for today's video. Hopefully you enjoyed that long-term planning. So obviously we went over openings there just to see how far we could see into the future there. Most of the time it's just going to be a later middle game, and also the end game sort of part where we might be able to know where our pieces are going to be. So hopefully you enjoyed today's video. So thank you, and bye bye.